All right. Welcome to Waste Some Time with Jason Green. I'm Jason Green, and I'm glad you're back watching. We got about 30 interviews on the channel right now, and new ones every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then there's some cool content in between on the other days. So definitely busy. So make sure you subscribe, and so that you know when these videos are coming out. And also it helps me when I have to call my rock star friends and tell them to do an interview that they see there's more than, 200, 300, 400 people on the channel. So let's get that going. We're going to have a really cool conversation today, unfiltered, unedited. This is just the way it goes. My guest today, David Ellefson. You guys know him. He has everything going on. There's never been somebody who's stayed more active during this pandemic than David. We're going to talk books. We're going to talk movies. We're going to talk coffee. Of course, we're going to talk Megadeth, and it's going to be all right after this. Just wanna waste some time with you. Sometimes it seems too good to be true. Nobody I'd rather waste time with than you. All right, here we go. He's a busy man, so let's get right to it. David Ellefson.
Jason, what's happening, buddy?
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, man. How are you? How you been?
I'm doing good. You?
Well, like we talked earlier, busy, which is awesome, and productively busy. You and I have probably both been busy doing things that like you bear no fruit, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? And you just get frustrated because it's a lot of busy work. But it's been great. The thing kind of on deck that sort of fell on deck. I mean, we planned a setup for it, but is this found footage horror film that we have called Dwellers, and we strategically set it up to launch it a couple weeks ago at Mad Monster Horror Con in North Carolina. But leading up to it and now pushing through it, it's we're getting blessed with all these great awards and cool stuff, So sometimes you get these freebies that sort of fall in your lap when you're not really looking for them, which is, I think, that's kind of the beauty of life, I guess, right?
So now this movie's going to come out on October 12th. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yep. We just pushed out an announcement on it today. So,
yeah. And so for people who might not know, found footage is kind of like a Blair Witch type of movie, right?
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. Yeah. That's why, it's funny when people ask, it's like our band, dude, what does your band sound like? So you always have to draw some comparison, even though we all hate that because we all like to think, oh, it's completely original, bro. It doesn't sound like anybody, but the reality of it is everything's kind of a derivative of something. But yeah, the found footage genre, which the director and the writer of the film, Drew 48, he's I've gotten to know a lot about that genre, and it's popular at these horror cons too. It's a really popular genre. I mean, I guess the beauty of it is there's like no budget because it doesn't cost anything. It's like picking up your camera and film. Blair Witch certainly made it. I think probably brought the most popularity to the genre, and that was of course more kind of a cult genre. This is a more thriller horror. I guess anything that has blood in it can fall into horror, right? I think that's kind of the definition. It scares you, that's thriller. If it's got blood, it's horror, right? If it's got demons and things, then it's a cult, right? So, the film genre is probably more segregated than music. You and I grew up at a time when there was just rock and roll, and then there was hard rock, and then there was acid rock, and then there's blues rock and funk rock and metal, and and then all the subgenres of metal. But I guess it goes to show everybody's being creative and coming up with more content. So
for sure. And you've got during the pandemic, people could just sit around and wait, or they could get to work. And so you've got Ellefson movies, Ellefson books. But I want to talk first before we get into all that. I know people want to hear about Megadeth, and of course we're going to get to that too. But I want to talk about coffee with you, David.
Sure. And let's do it.
I want you to sell me some coffee, because here's the thing. I don't drink coffee. I'm in the minority. Everybody loves it.
Well,
and
I don't happen to have a bag right here.
Nice. Look at that. Well, we're going to go through. I'm prepared to go through it because I want you to convince me what I've been missing.
Okay.
And so we're going to take a look right now. Hold on. Let's bring this up. Okay. So this right now that we're looking at, this is the Ellefson Coffee Company, and the website is EllefsonCoffeeCo.com. And so not only, David, do you have your own lines, but other bands are marketing coffee through you. But so now I want you to convince me that, that this isn't just some band throwing their name on a bag of beans, because I know you know your stuff. And
Right.
so people should know this isn't just a merch item. You're passionate about coffee.
I am. I mean, and I am very much passionate about it. I'm very particular about what I drink. I drink usually 2 cups, one in the morning, which can be kind of a lighter roast, because lighter roast coffees actually have more caffeine in them and kind of get you, wound up and get out the door in the morning. Right before we got on this call, I had a dark roast, which I like darker roasts in the afternoon. They're strong, obviously, but they don't have as much caffeine. They don't get you as jittery, and they often go well with like an afternoon snack. Like if you're gonna, I always kind of get a sweet tooth later in the day because, as my energy drops, later in the day, I've been rocking all day doing stuff, and so if I need a little pick me up, sometimes, and I've kind of switched over more to kind of dark chocolate. But I definitely get a sweet tooth. It's probably my blood type or something.
Now, what do you put in your coffee, David? I
use Chobani oat milk, like an extra creamy version of it. I got turned on to oat milk in Europe a couple years ago. Oatly has a great brand, and there's sort of a barista blend that they have that is quite popular over there. Europe has been a much earlier adapter of the sort of vegan vegetarian thing. So they got on board, I think, quicker with that. I don't like, I really don't drink much dairy at all.
Yeah, me neither.
At all, right? So I'll, even for, I use from, Doyle Misfits has a terrific, his Vegan Monster protein blend, which is a vegan thing. But even with that, I'll use coconut milk because it's a little thinner and lighter for a shake. I know with coffee things to be thick, so that's where I like the oat milk. I don't like rice milk. I don't like coconut milk in my coffee. I don't like that stuff. So if I'm gonna deviate from kind of a traditional, half and half thing, which we Americans are well known for, to the Chobani.
Yeah, okay. Well, now let's take a look at some of these things here. So the first one, this is, let's just click on it. Let's see here. Uh-oh. There we go. Look, now this is the Rock and Rose, and I see a portion of the money goes to breast cancer charity, which is great.
Yeah, there's breast cancer. Yeah, the Rose, down in Houston. So look, Rock and Rose, just to kind of go through it. So Rock and Rose is our lightest roast that we have. If just to give a similar, you walk into Starbucks, they always have like their blonde, their their Veranda, and then they always have like a darker roast, like an Italian or a Cafe Verona or something like that. So that Rock and Rose would sit as a sort of a blonde roast if you had to sort of draw a comparison. Napalm in the morning, sitting right next to it, is our shout out to Combat Records. That is a dark roast. That is almost entirely French roast, so super dark. If you needed a quick pick me up, the Rock and Rose would amp you up quicker. The Combat Napalm in the morning is a darker, again, like kind of like my afternoon coffee, right? Okay. Next to that, the Italian roast is what Autograph uses in their coffee. So Italian, again, nice, dark, rich. If you're going to do espresso shots and things like that, the Italian is always good for that.
Now this is the band Autograph. I just had Steve Lynch on here the other day. Yeah. So okay, so this is one of the bands that's involved. Okay, so what do we got next?
They got a great album titled "Get Off Your Ass," so that works good for coffee. As does the one right next to it, "Slave to the Grind" by Skid Row. That's like one of the best coffee, coffee album titles ever. And again, that's a dark roast, similar to. We'll get to it here in a minute. As you go down to the next row down, me and Frank Bello, we have a little group called Altitudes and Attitudes. So we did a dark espresso roast. So that's dark, and just like it says, like it's great for shots, for espresso. Any of these sort of French, Italian, those things. Here's a funny story. I was in Europe, right, and I went to a Starbucks downstairs in the hotel in Amsterdam, and I was asking them for an Italian roast. They said, "No, we don't have that." And I started asking for a French roast. They don't have that. So I mentioned it to Kiko, our guitar player, when we got on the bus, and he's from Brazil, and so he said, he goes, "Well, think about it. We don't make an American roast." And I thought, Good point. Here in America, only in America, hey, it's an Italian, a French. So these are not, global names for coffee, a French roast, an Italian roast. These are very kind of indicative of how Americans describe coffee, right? So, but espresso roast for sure is. So that's what the Altitudes and Attitude is. Next to it is Roast in Peace, hands down our biggest seller. It is our flagship coffee. It's the one that we started the entire coffee company on. So if you needed to go to one center spot that has, it's a dark roast, but not too dark. It's not gritty like an espresso. It's not a light roast, but if you like a lighter coffee, so again, I guess what I'm saying is if you had to pick one to go at, that would probably be the one, right? And of course, kind of a cool name, I think.
Very cool, yeah.
Eddie Ojeda from Twisted Sister next to that. His tends to be it's around a Roast in Peace offering. It's pretty similar.
He's on the show next week.
What's that?
He's going to be on the show next week. So
great. Awesome. Yeah. Please tell Eddie hello. Yep.
Absolutely.
Next to that, we have a couple of roasts that we do for the Grammys. They have a pillar of their business called Music Cares, which is a foundation for offering health care and aid to musicians and people in the arts. And so the Morning Melody, as it says, is a dark espresso roast. Right below the second. Go down just a scotch more, because the next one down below is the High Grown Harmony, and that is a light roast. So we have both a dark and a light, and we even offer a bundle on those there. And a portion of those proceeds go to Music Cares. So that's another charity coffee that we have. And the Michael Wilton one actually is discontinued. We don't have any more. So
okay.
There you have it.
Yeah, and then you can buy some T-shirts and other cool things too.
Yep.
So now, David, which one? I'm not a big coffee drinker. I'm not a big caffeine guy. I know that's sacrilege. What should I start with?
Well, again, I would go for Roast in Peace. That is our flagship roast. It like to even just figuratively, it's right there, kind of in the center of all those roasts. I think with that, if you do have a cup of coffee, it's got a great flavor, and it tastes like coffee, but it's not gritty and bitter, and it'll give you enough of a little juice if you need it. So
yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to give it a shot.
There you go. Perfect.
You've sold me. I'm ready to try
Cheers.
it. Absolutely. And we got the cup too. Yeah. So okay. So far we've talked about the upcoming movie, right? The Dwellers comes out October 12th. We've talked about the Ellefson coffee. Right. Now we got to talk about the book, which you have a lot of books, but I want to talk about this the
most recent one.
Yeah, the fictional autobiography, and this is called Rockstar Hitman. And this is actually available
right here.
There it is. Nice. And this is available Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. You can get this right now, and we'll put some links down below. So if anyone's interested in checking out actually any of David's products, we'll have links for you to look. So tell me how the book came about.
So the book, as you said, I've written several books. I wrote a how-to book called Making Music Your Business published in 1997. I've written 2 memoirs. I wrote My Life with Deth, which came out in 2013, I believe, and then More Life with Deth, published in 2019 when that came out. So this idea hit me. Ironically, I was on tour, on a solo tour down in South America, and it was back in December of 2019, so a little over a year ago. And the idea came to me about, a rock star. We're famous by what we do at night, right? And by way of signing a I don't know what the word would be, unformidable contract, if you will, with a record company or an agency. This poor young rock star signed a contract that says by day he has to go be a hitman and do some dirty work for the agency, if you will. You and I, being in our business like we've been for many years, we've often felt like maybe not having to go, kill people, but like working for the man, if you will, right? And that's essentially, so there's a lot of kind of double entendre in here with, you know, and I think anybody feels like that. It's like, oh my God, I'm beholden, I'm enslaved to my boss, if you will. Like I can't get out of this job, you know, like there's no way out, that sort of feeling. And obviously it's a thriller. It's as you said, it's a fictional autobiography. It's written from the perspective of our singer musician guy named Sledge. And as we say on the cover, Sledge Chronicles. So we've got another book in the works, and the idea of this is that it doesn't just have to be sort of one book that ends and then the story ends. Like the narrative can continue on with more books to come, which we're actually working on right now.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds really cool, and I think look, this is the time people can get a good book to read. You know what I mean? While we're sitting at home.
And we've got, it comes in hardcover, softcover, the Kindle ebook versions. There's an audiobook that I did that's through Amazon. So yeah, if you're more of a listen to books rather than read them, then by all means you can listen to me narrate. You know, I can
think that might be me.
You can lullaby you to sleep with a nice thriller.
Well, do you read the book?
I do. I read it. Yeah.
Okay, good, because you have a soothing voice, Dave. You've got a radio voice, I feel.
I know people tell me that. They're like, man, you should be in radio. Like people at the grocery store will turn around and go, man, your voice is like, are you in radio? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Everybody tells me I should be, but you know, I've never applied for a radio station. Maybe that's what I should do. Maybe
right.
That's my calling. I've missed it all these years.
Yeah, you could have been a WKRP or something, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned WKRP. What was his name? Not Nessman, but who's the kind of the cool Johnny Fever? So it's funny, you know, you've been to LA, Jim Ladd, you know, on LOS, he was on KMET. It's funny how I figured, you know, when I moved and I heard that, I thought, God, this is totally work. He got this like kind of the cool evening guy, you know. You know,
David Elvison in the evening, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, have the cool voice, you know, in the evening. Yeah. Okay,
David.
My favorite show growing up.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. And, you know, unfortunately now people will never get the full idea because of the music licensing, the DVDs and it's all been re-edited. So you don't get the exact feel that we got when we saw it.
Really? I didn't know that. I heard somebody else say something about that with TV. Is that really the case? Like because there were songs played or something?
Yeah, well, because you know they would play huge songs on that show, and the contracts didn't have you know, future technology yet. Now, if you sign a contract, they've got you for everything, things that have not been invented. But back then, it ended, and some of these bands. I mean, there was probably Rolling Stones or something was on it that they just couldn't get the rights. So the show's a little. I mean, it's still funny, but you're not seeing it exactly the way we saw it the first time.
Wow. Yeah. WKRP and One Time with Valerie Bertinelli. You know, those were like the big Three's Company, right? Those were like the big, cool shows back in the day. You know,
absolutely. That was when television was at its best. So, David, we're going to talk a little bit about Megadeth. Everyone's asked you the same questions 10 million times. So let's try to talk a little bit different. I want to find out where some of these guys who were in the band were, because I was thinking, you know, Metallica does these big shows where they bring back all their former guys. You guys got a lot of people, but I don't see that reunion happening anytime soon. But let's get started.
It's funny you met. I have brought that up a couple of times because I thought it would be very cool. The first time was in 2004 when things were starting to kind of reform again, and you know, I thought that would actually be and maybe that will be a moment at some point. You know, it's funny you see like Asia and Yes go out in these tours and they kind of swap members, you know, and I thought too, you know, now we have the Mega Cruise, which I think may be a good platform, something like that. You know, it's you know, there like Marty Friedman gone on to have a wonderful career, solo career. Chris Poland as well. You know, so you know, Al Trelli's in Trans-Siberian Orchestra. So you know, these guys have, you know, great players when they joined the band, and you know, some of them have gone on to have some cool careers afterwards. You know,
well, now
solo stuff was not easy. You know,
now this is Killing Is My Business. This is 1985. Before this record, though, I want to know, where is D. John Carruthers, one of the greatest names I've ever heard? Where's this guy at?
Yeah. So his dad was an actor, Ben Carruthers, and he was in things like The Dirty Dozen and a bunch of things like that. And he's funny. Not funny. He passed away actually, I think, in late in '83. I remember me and Dave and Dijon going up to the father's house, I think, up in the Hollywood Hills for the wake. It's very bizarre because that's a different crowd. The movie industry crowd. And I just moved to LA, been there like 3 months. I mean, this is bizarre. Somebody's house in the hills, and there's this whole procession going on, but Dijon was very cool. His brother played bass in a very happening band in '83 called the Untouchables, and they were kind of like a Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, maybe something like that. They were having a lot of success in LA. They were on K-Rock. They were playing a lot of the cool shows. So musical, creative family. It's funny. Black Friday, Good Morning Black Friday. The lyric on the Peace Cells album was largely his. He was crafting a lot of that, so that's why he gets a little shout out on there. Yeah. But yeah, honestly, I've his name and photo came across my email or something, maybe last year, but I have not talked to him. You know how it is in bands. Sometimes it's like once you're done in the band, you never talk to each other again, and he's one of those guys. He was really into Ritchie Blackmore, really into Cozy Powell, Les Binks, these guys from back in that day, big Judas Priest, kind of Deep Purple fan that was kind of his sweet spot.
Yeah. Now, at this time, was Kerry King from Slayer playing some live shows with you guys?
Yeah, so Dijon, the original founding lineup, so Dave, Greg Handovit, my friend from Minnesota, who I moved out to LA with, me on bass, Greg was playing rhythm guitar, second guitar, I should say, to Dave. Dave had a vocalist named Laura Kane, who Dave was trying to work with as a singer when Greg and I met Dave in June of '83. And keep in mind, Dave had just departed Metallica like I don't know, early or mid-April. So I mean, this is only like 6 or 7 weeks after post Metallica when we met Dave. There's another guy named Matt Kisselstein that Dave was teaching the songs to. Bass player, cool guy, young guy from Beverly Hills, but not, I wouldn't say a rock star bass player. It's funny, he works in administration. He's kind of like a higher up at, last time I saw him at the Eagle in Dallas, a big, P1 rock radio station down there. We had a good laugh, like it all kind of worked out, he ended up over in that. He's a businessman and I'm a bass player, so he actually somebody I did run into, recently, but so that lineup with Dijon on drums, and that lasted kind of like through maybe June and July of '83. By August, everybody was gone except just me and Dave, and then we started auditioning. We got a drummer named Lee Rausch who came in to the fold, and then Kerry King. By the end of '84, Kerry King had come in to start playing, to be our second guitar player. He was in Slayer at the time, and we were still trying to audition singers up to this point. And I remember it was New Year's Eve of '83 going into '84, and another singer flaked out. And Dave just took the lyrics and like pinned them up either on the wall or on like a mic stand. And we had a microphone there, and he just went up to the mic, and we started playing. And I don't know what it was. I mean, I think it was something like Chosen Ones or Looking Down the Cross. I mean, it's not easy to play and sing, and he did it. He sang through it, and we stopped, and I just went, dude, that was freaking amazing, And he looked at me, and he was like, really? And face is all red because he's not really breathing like a singer, and plus trying to riff and play those complex parts. And it just hit me. I was just like, look, man, you're writing the lyrics. No one's gonna get inside this character that you're singing from more than you. I mean, you're the obvious guy, so it was weird that we then turned into a 4-piece, which is what Dave had just come out of from Metallica. Mm-hmm. And of course, in Metallica, Dave was not the singer; he was kind of the front man, as I understand. In between the songs, he did all the banter with the audience. but he was obviously the lead guitar player, and James Hetfield was the singer. So it's kind of interesting how then James became really the front man of Metallica, of course, when Dave was out of there. And then Dave, now in Megadeth, becomes the singer. So they both kind of swapped roles. They both kind of had to step up to maybe the parts of the job that they weren't doing before. Not that Dave was never hired to be the singer of Metallica. So it's kind of funny that is now a new role for him, So it all, and of course Hetfield has become one of the greatest frontmen in rock and roll, period. I mean, he's on the level of like Bono, I mean, he's, doing those big four shows with him, hearing him command the stadiums is like, man, it's like he's just such a powerhouse. It's impressive.
Yes. Okay. So now first record comes out, and here it is at 85. Now this lineup, we got Chris Poland on guitar, and Chris is doing more jazz these days, right?
Well, so we did. Let me just walk through it, and I'm sorry I'm talking so long. This would take us like 8 hours to get through all of these records. So I'll try to. But there's a lot of detail to this stuff, and I'm sorry I get so bogged down with it. But so we debuted the band in early 1984 in San Francisco with Kerry King on guitar, Lee Rausch on drums, me and Dave. Right. We go back up again in February and April of '84. We debuted the group. Right. And right after that, Kerry King decides he's going back to Slayer full time because he saw there was an audience for it, and the Bay Area, was the holy grail. And Kerry saw that and went, "That's it. I now see the vision of Slayer." And Lee Rausch came home, and he literally said, "He goes, man, I got to take some acid and go up in the mountains and go find myself." Me and Dave were like, all right, have at it. And we had met a manager guy. We were rehearsing at this rehearsal studio called Curly Joe's in downtown. It's like an old brewery, and he'd had a floor that he'd converted to a rehearsal hall. And we met this kind of real fast talking shystery manager guy named Jay Jones. And so I had gotten a job working, just trying to make some money, because me and Dave were just flat broke, So I got a job at this rehearsal studio called Mars Studio on Melrose over by Vermont, right? Those are the cross streets in Hollywood. And by working there, not only did I finally have a little paycheck, but Dave and I actually moved in with the guy that was managing the place, this guy named Hanley. And of course, After Hours provided, free rehearsal for Megadeth. And so it was a great job. It had many perks. Got a place to live, got a place to rehearse, and had a little money, Jay Jones brought down, he recommended a guy named Gar Samuelson to join Megadeth to play drums. And Jay had recently managed a band that Gar and Chris Poland were in called the New Yorkers. And they were like a really progressive fusion group. I mean, very much like Return to Forever and Mahavishnu Orchestra. I mean, incredible. And they didn't get signed. They missed their window, Motley Crue and Rat and all that happened, and so they kind of missed their window. But so Gar was working, he was a general manager at BC Rich Guitars at the time. And so Gar comes down to Mars Studio, and I reserve a little room for us. And so he sets up, and he's got, kind of a smaller double bass, but a smaller tom-toms, and not a big thundering cannon heavy metal drum kit at all, right? Like two racks, 2 floors. And sets up, and he's got these kind of, dress shoes on and slacks because he had just come from work at BC Rich. And he starts playing, and Gar was this real finesse guy, and he kind of had this Charlie Watts meets, Bill Bruford, very much a fusion rock kind of player. And we started playing, and I could tell right away. I was kind of interested to see how Dave was going to respond because I'd played in jazz band growing up in high school, so I knew of all these people. Gar had, was kind of taking a page out of their musical playbook, if you will. I had done my studies with jazz, so I was interested to see how that would integrate in with music that Dave was writing, that we were writing then. And he loved it. He just, for Dave, Gar was like instant great drum beat on demand, like he could play something, and Gar's interpretation of it, it wasn't like it was like every other heavy metal drummer of that day. And He could explain things to Gar. Gar was a couple years older than me and Dave, so he had more experience, so he wasn't intimidated at all by anything. And that's how he got in the fold. And we went up to, I guess we played in San Francisco. We played at the Waters Club down in San Pedro. And you got to realize, for a heavy metal band in L.A., there's the Sunset Strip, obviously, where
Right.
Motley and Rat, Quiet Riot, and that whole scene, Van Halen, that scene had come from. But the bands like Megadeth and Slayer and Dark Angel, and I guess probably even Metallica before they moved to the Bay Area, these really off the strip clubs, almost more like rock theaters and very, these clubs were not in the mainstream of the hair metal thing. And so, Jay Jones kept recommending that Chris Poland join the band because he and Gar were friends. And Gar, Chris had come down to hear the band. He saw us play at the Club in San Pedro. And Jay took us in the studio. It's funny you asked this because just yesterday I was talking to our webmaster. We were talking about this demo that we did that had Last Rites, Love to Death, Mechanics, and Skull Beneath the Skin. So essentially 4 of the cuts off of Killing Is My Business was this demo. And it was never properly released, but we recorded it over at Hitman Studios on Fairfax next to Cherokee Studios. And Jay Jones paid for it, which made him the executive producer. He's warning, that's what an executive producer is that's the guy that put up the money, basically. So when you see that credit on the album. So he paid for this demo, and we put it on KMAT, ironically, where Jim Ladd was. Funny we're talking about WKRP, right? So Jim Ladd was there. Then he moved over to KLS. But he was at KMAT, and along with Samantha Fox. And I remember Samantha Fox had this like late night kind of metal hour. And she spun the first Megadeth song ever on KMET. And I seem to remember it was Mechanics. And I could be wrong, but I seem to remember it was Mechanics was the one that she spun. And it was cool that we finally had like a track, because back in that day, I remember on like that same metal hour, they were playing like, Queensryche had this song called Queen of the Reich. And of course they were from Seattle. There's another band called Warrior out of LA called Fighting for the Earth was their track. Armored Saint, ironically, I have their shirt on. They had tracks. They were about to get signed, but they had songs that were on these sort of late night heavy metal hours, on KMET. And so that was, the launch of the band. We signed to Combat Records in late '84. We went in the studio and cut Killing Is My Business. We flew, ironically, then Megadeth and Slayer got offered a slot to play at L'Amour's in Brooklyn, New York. And so we flew out there. That was December of '84. Excuse me, it must have been right as we were recording Killing Is My Business. We went out and we played those shows. So, Megadeth, Slayer, we grew up together, We spent most of our years, sharing stages and being on shows as far back as '84, So then turned the page into, Chris Poland recorded Killing Is My Business with us, put solos and some rhythms down. He did not do the tour with us in '85. But then after that, we did some dates with Motorhead. I remember at the Santa Monica Civic Center and I think San Diego. And then we did some other stuff with the Mentors, if you remember them. They were on
Absolutely
bills with us, right? So we did, these cool, so it was Motorhead, Wendy O. Williams, Megadeth. We did those Santa Monica and San Diego, and then these shows with the Mentors, and then we did a little run of dates, and all during this time we were then writing what would become the Peace Sells album, and we did a little tour. Through from the west, LA where we lived, but it was about a 3-week tour that we did up and down the East Coast, playing like every song we knew, Killing Is My Business, and what would become, the Peace Sells album, and that's why we knew every night when we started the song Peace Sells, Gar would start with the kick drum, kind of. And then I'd start with the bass line, and then the band would come in. And we could tell that we had something there, And
well, now while you're talking about that, we got to point out that at the time there was that thing called MTV News, and
Mm,
it was the biggest thing. I'm sure kids now would have no idea what it is, but so
yeah.
Kurt Loder would host the MTV News, and they'd break in to let you know that Kurt Cobain just passed away, or something less significant. The Spice Girls just came to America, but your bass line from Peace Sells
Basically, I know.
would always be the intro. And if you watched MTV, you
Yeah,
heard that bass line 50, 60 times a day.
I know.
So now the big question, David, is can you make any money off that?
We did get paid for that stuff. In fact, there was a big class action lawsuit against Viacom, who owned VH1 and MTV. And I remember one day my lawyer said, "Hey, we're advising all of our clients to fill out this link." So you click the link, and there's these nice drop down menus. And I mean, they had every song that I'd played on, was a co-writer on or writer on, and you just kind of click yes and hit send and one day, I don't know, 6 months later, I went to the mailbox and there was a check. So it was a class action because I think all of the publishers, I mean, everybody was in on it. Sony and Warner Brothers and everybody was in on it because I think they realized just what you were saying with WKRP earlier, that there were all these cues. Our songs were being used as these little bumpers in and out of, MTV Spring Break or, whatever it is. They'd use some Chili Peppers, thing or some whatever, music. And so we finally all got paid. We got caught up. And like you said, there's probably not a lot of clarity in those contracts as to what constituted what in TV they call it a cue, that would kind of music into a segment and out of a segment. But, somehow this class action got it sorted out. So we all got paid.
Does someone ask you, or does one day you see it?
What's that? The
The
money or
baseline in MTV
the
News.
baseline? Yeah, so it's funny. So we signed to Capitol Records on that little 3-week tour. Tim, who was the A&R guy for Capitol, came down to Irving Plaza to see our show, and that would have been probably February of '86. He sees the band. Our agent Andy Summers at the time kind of facilitated that and liked what he saw. It was interesting. Michael Alago, who also has a great film out. Who the fuck is this guy? I think is what it's called.
Great.
So Mike, as we would know him, he signed Metallica to Elektra. So enough said. And with Cyndi Lauper and all kinds of other people. I don't even know his entire resume, but he's a real music guy. There's a reason he had a job at a record company, and so he was courting me and Dave to sign Megadeth to Elektra, and so as often happens, one line in the water, the fish start biting. Pretty soon, more fish come. So Capitol Records came around, MCA I remember came around, and so we had this little bidding war over Megadeth, which was cool. We ended up going with Capitol, and so we had recorded P-Cells in, I think, probably about April and May of '86 for Combat. It was originally recorded with their money. They gave us $25,000. We cut the record, which was a huge step up from the $8,000 we had to cut Killing Is My Business with, right? So,
Which and to all reports, you guys only spent about half that money, right?
yeah, well, Jay Jones and our crew and gang was around. We were doing what we called that the heroin and hamburgers record, and whatever else we could get. That's about all we could afford. But $8,000 wasn't a lot. I mean, those big rooms, where we recorded the basic tracks of Killing Is My Business up at Indigo Ranch in Malibu. This thing's probably at least 1,000 a day. You know what I mean? And we're in there for 4 or 5 days. There's most of the budget's gone, so it doesn't go very far. But so for Peace Cells, we had a more accommodating budget. Randy Burns was hired by Combat to produce the record, and so we went into the Music Grinder, also kind of a pricey room, but we went in there and that was down on Melrose, and we cut P-Cells, and then Dave and Chris and Randy went off to some other studios like Mad Dog Studios and some smaller, less expensive places to cut the rest of the guitars and vocals, and pretty much had it done in like a month. As we got signed, thank God we got signed, because Combat wanted to call the record "Wake Up Dead," and we were just like, the obvious single here is Peace Sells, right? And me and Dave and Andy Summers had actually sat at a little place called Wiley's Ribs across the street from the UN, and we just started riffing and talking about that. What became the Peace Sells album cover? You know, there's the UN and these fighter jets flying over and bombing it out, and the place is all blown up. And peace sells, but who's buying? And Vic will be out front with a for sale sign. So that was all. That whole thing was conjured up. You know, while we were, I guess we had recorded the record. Dave and I went back to New York. Michael Lago was courting us to get signed to Elektra. And that was when we had that conversation to come up with the artwork, and we hired Ed Repka to do the artwork. That may have been a Combat suggestion, actually, to get Ed. And that was a good one. Obviously, he does great work. But then we signed to Capitol, and so me and Chris Poland and Dave Mustaine, we had an apartment. So we finally had a little money. Finally, we got signed to Capitol, right? Mm-hmm. So we had some money. We got a band apartment. So the three of us lived there, and I remember they had like a kitchen area, and Chris was in there like doing the dishes or something, right? And all of a sudden we hear Kurt Loder in the background, MTV News, do, right? You've heard it here. And Chris was like almost dropped the freaking dishes. He goes, "Holy hell, was that us? Was that our song?" And I was standing there next to him. I go, I think it was, And then you wait, and then the next time, remember they would switch it every other one. They do that DJ scratch, right?
Right.
MTV News, you heard it here, right? So we're like, oh, maybe it wasn't us. Well, maybe it was a one-time thing, So, who knew? And then it went on to become a thing, I guess. So
yeah, it's something that you never could have expected. I mean, you knew the song was good, you knew the song was popular, but you could never have known that you're going to hear it. For that many years.
MTV God smiled on it. So a lot of people are like, oh, fuck MTV. I'm like, I kind of like them. They did good. They did good by me. They did good by us. So
no, MTV definitely did good for you guys. I want to catch up a little bit on some of the members. Chris Poland is still playing. He plays jazz music. And Gar Samuelson, unfortunately, it has passed away. There is sort of, if there's a curse with Megadeth, I hate to say it's the drummer spot. You have three.
The irony of the Spinal Tap thing, and that's not meant to be any laughing stock to,
of course,
Chris or I'm sorry, Gar or Nick Menza, but the irony of the movie would make that out to be a thing, But yeah, it's Gar was an awesome guy, a funny guy, a charming, loving guy. He lived a very risque lifestyle, and maybe could be said with Nick Menza. We all love Nick. I always said he was like the Tommy Lee of thrash metal, man. I mean, he pushed the envelope. He was athletic. He was, everything he did, man. He went right out to the edge, and. When he left the group, we didn't really have too much contact with him after that. And then we did, and in recent years before he passed, we connected. In fact, we even, kicked around the idea of maybe doing a Rust in Peace anniversary reunion with that lineup you have there. And unfortunately, at that point, Marty was off doing things. Marty left Megadeth because he wanted to go do his own stuff. So he wasn't. He's a friend of ours, and he's not estranged from us at all. We're buddies.
He's in Japan mostly, isn't he?
He is. Yep, and he's done very well. So for him, I think as he's even said, to come back into a group he once was in, and it wasn't his group. He joined the band. He was not. He's not a founder. So for him, he loved the time that he had, but when it was time to go on, it was time to go on, and. As a friend, I think you release them with love. You let them go to explore what they want to do, and you don't hold grudges, and you move on. But yeah, I mean, it was a magical lineup for sure. This is
probably the most consistent lineup of the band
for sure.
At this point, 1990, Rust in Peace, 92, Countdown to Extinction, 94, Euthanasia, 97, Cryptic Writings, and 99, Risk. Pretty much with this lineup intact.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, Jimmy DeGrasso came in to replace Nick Menza
in '99, right?
Really in '98, actually on the tour. Nick was having health issues then, and it was obvious. It was starting to really affect the performances. We were just getting ready to go out on the Ozfest '98, and we had to make a change. It was, Dave loved Jimmy. Jimmy had played on a solo record for him called MD45. And Jimmy's fantastic. I mean, he's the guy that listens to the song once, sit down and plays it. He's that guy. So he was did us a solid by being able to come in. But it changed the sound of the band. I mean, he very different drummer, very different musician. Nick was very much a creative caveat through the records that he performed on. What is it, 4 records? What, Rush, Countdown, Youth? So he and some one-offs. Angry
Live.
Again. 99 Ways to Die. We did some Go to Hell. We did some soundtrack work during that time as well. So Nick,
absolutely.
Nick was just a fiery force for sure.
I was in Hollywood doing some work, and I'm driving past the Baked Potato, and Chris Poland and Nick Menza's names are on the marquee. They're playing, and literally by the time I got to my hotel, maybe 30 minutes later, it was on the news that he had passed away at that very gig. And the next day, driving back, the billboard now says "Rest in peace, Nick Menza." Because he did pass away on stage.
I get goosebumps when you say that, because Nick and I were hanging probably about a year and a half before that. That was when we had reconnected, and he came down to Fallbrook to where Dave's house and the studio is, and we jammed. We tried to see if we could make a go of a Rest in Peace reunion, and it just, you could tell, as much as the ambition was there for it, it just didn't connect.
Yeah.
It's probably like hooking up with an old girlfriend. You remember you remember good times from years past, and for some reason the magic's gone. Funny, I just heard the Hall & Oates song today, "Lost That Lovin' Feeling." You know what I mean? That's kind of what it was. It's and it just wasn't meant to be. And it's interesting, I remember we were in Albany, New York on the Dystopia tour, and Dave called me in the middle of the night, just in tears, just shaken up. He goes, "Oh my God, Nick's dead." I'm like, "What?" I mean, it's the middle of the night. I was like, "Huh? Who is this?" And he said, he goes, "Man, my son Justice just told me." And I was like, "Oh my God." So it was heart-wrenching. And there was, look, despite it not working out musically and kind of business-wise with us there toward the end, there was definitely a brotherhood, and I think especially with Dave and Nick, those two guys were, they were buddies in a way probably the others of us weren't. Nick and I were kind of like health buddies, and out playing tennis and mountain bike riding, and I was getting sober and getting clean back in.
We'll get into that a little bit in a minute.
Yeah, he was big on that. But Dave and Nick had a very rock and roll, like, fun. They could hang. They had a cool friendship, I think.
You guys, Megadeth, have had some personalities in that band. Jeff Young, who lives here in Las Vegas, played on So Far, So Good, So What. This guy's a character, he's a
As
nice
they all
enough,
are.
he's a nice enough guy, but this is a flat earth guy, and he's,
You probably know him more than I do in recent years. However, I did do a jam unexpectedly, at NAMM. They do the Ronnie Montrose Remembered show, and I played bass for Ronnie with Jimmy DeGrasso. We were in Ronnie's band for, 2007 to 2009, something like that. And so Ronnie passed, and now they do this annual thing at NAMM. So we were jamming. I try to sit in every year and play a couple tunes. And that year it was, it's funny. It was me, Brad Gillis, from Night Ranger, Gilby Clarke, Jeff Young was way over on the stage right. So I literally, seeing each other walking on stage for me plugging my bass into like, get ready to play. "Oh, hey Jeff, what's up? Hey bro, how are you?" It was one of those, I hadn't seen him in for like 20, 25 years, so
that's the reunion.
It was fun, so, but yeah, that's
the stories I can tell about him are stories that I can only tell you, but
yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't want to bash the guy too much.
Yeah, no, they're rock and roll. I get it. Yeah.
But I do want to talk about Dimebag Darrell. And I want you to tell me the time frame, because at one point you guys were looking for a guitar player. And Dimebag was an option, but he had a stipulation that didn't work out for you guys. And I'd love for you to tell me about it.
So I was in '88. I was dating this woman, and she was from Fort Worth, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we go down there to hang one summer, and she knew. She said, "Do you want to meet the Pantera guys?" We all kind of grew up together. So I said, "Sure." They were playing actually the next night at a venue. So we got together. Phil Anselmo was pretty new in the band. They had a record called Power Metal, which is still one of my favorite Pantera records. And most people only know them from the next record after that, which is Cowboys from Hell. Onward, they know them as this real brutal, kind of groovy swamp thrash band, right? But there's a different Pantera.
Yes.
Power metal backward to their earlier records, when that was their earlier years. So we get together, we hang, we go out drinking. I was still drinking and partying then, so we're out drinking, and it was a great hang. I certainly knew of him, from all the guitar magazines. Darrell was, a rising star for sure, and I loved that he played a Dean. I always wanted a Dean when I was a kid, a Dean guitar, and I never got. So I thought it was kind of cool that he played those. So we were hanging at the end of the night. Excuse me. He said to me, he comes up to me, he looks me straight in the eye, and he goes, "David," he goes, "Man, the Peace Cells album changed my life." And I was like, and it was a heartfelt moment, and I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Man, that album, that was the one." And I was like, "Oh, that was cool of him." And the next night we went to go see him at the club that they played. The place was packed. And I remember those guys could drink a lot and play really good because we drank that much and we didn't play as good as those guys did. They must have had good Texas resistance or something, tolerance. But they were great. I mean, they were so good. They were solid. They were tight. They invited me up. I played Peace Cells with them. And we're just great guys, and then, fast forward. So that, again, let's say that was, I don't know, June, July or something of 88. And fast forward to January of 89. At this point, Jeff Young is out of Megadeth. Chuck Beeler is still our drummer. We'd cut a 3-song demo of songs that would become Rust in Peace. We had Holy Wars in its entirety done, and then we had the music for Polaris and what would become Tornado of Souls. So, but we needed a guitar player. So I told Dave, we were kicking around ideas. Jeff Waters from Annihilator was one of them. And then we reached out to Darrell, and Dave called him, and like he said, he goes, "Look, this obviously, huge honor, but with me would come my brother. We've got our band Pantera, and it's interesting, isn't it? We didn't need a drummer, even though we would replace Chuck with Mick. We didn't need a drummer at that time, and it's. I mean, you can imagine, God, what if Dime and Vinny, joined Megadeth? Yeah. That would have been pretty cool. Yet at the same time, there'd be no Pantera. And think about without Pantera, there'd be no Lamb of God. Pantera, they were, they did for the next generation behind us what Metallica did to our generation. Yeah. So imagine if that would have gone down. So, things happen the way they're supposed to. Then Nick joined Megadeth in the summer of 89. And, we finished writing the rest of the Rust in Peace record. We even did a demo of it in December 89 that we hired Chris Poland to come in and play some solos on it. And we thought, quite honestly, we don't have a guitar player. I guess Rust in Peace is going to be, we'll do it like we did So Far So Good, So What? We'll go in as a 3-piece. And then we'll find a guy like a Jeff Young. We'll find a guy to come in and shred some solos, and we'll figure the tour out from there. And it's interesting that when we were recutting those demos in the EMI Music Publishing Studio, our manager, Ron Lafitte, his office was downstairs a couple floors down, and me and Dave went down with Ron to his office. This was late at night after hours, and he had on his desk 2 Marty Fried records. He had Dragon Kiss, his solo record, and the Cacophony album.
Yeah.
Right in there. And me and Dave were like, "Who's this?" And Ron was like, "Dude, I've been telling you guys for months, this guy wants to get an audition. His name is Marty Friedman." And me and Dave were like, "Yeah, we know him from Hawaii. He had a band called Hawaii." And so we were like, all right, may as well. Because earlier that summer we'd auditioned, I don't know, 12 guys, and none of them were at all in the realm, So we just were like, why not? Can't hurt. I mean, what do we got to lose? And so we turned the corner into the new year. So like January of 1990 or something, Marty comes down for an audition and landed the gig. So
It seems like it worked out in the universe for everybody. That was involved, like you said.
Yeah.
You guys
the
made
random
amazing albums.
moments. Yeah.
So
it's again, just happened to go down to the manager's office, bang, there's Marty album sitting there, and had that not happened, again, Marty may not have gotten to Megadeth. So yeah, life just has a way, the metal gods provide.
It's fun to, to think about what if. There's a story, I think it was something like the Red Sox and the Yankees were going to trade Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams or something over a drunken night. And so it was fun to think what could have happened, but things worked out the way they were supposed to. David, I want to talk a little bit on a serious note also, is that about addiction, recovery, and then your faith as well, because I feel like people give so much time to talking about those who did not win the battle against addiction. We talk about Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain and countless other people who just who didn't make it through this horrible thing. But you are one of the survivors, and obviously as a recovering survivor, you're still in recovery, and will be for the rest of your life. But I want you to tell me a little bit about, because Megadeth was a hard partying band. You guys really were doing drugs, heroin. This wasn't, a little fun habit. You guys were pretty messed up.
It was we were.
And I want you to tell me about how long you've been sober and what you did to get to that, to get it even started.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for asking. Well, so March 1st, just a couple of weeks ago, I just picked up 31 years. So
congratulations. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I got clean. Really, it's kind of the last week of February of 1990. Literally like within weeks before we went in to start cutting the tracks for Rust in Peace with producer Mike Klink. And it took me, my first trip to rehab was right after Castle Donington Monsters of Rock in August of 1988. I went to a treatment center in Van Nuys, and I agreed to go for 10 days. I lasted 3. I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. And then, I left, and finally by February of 89, I was back into another place, Brotman Hospital in Coal City. I lasted 2 weeks. And then I left for a day, got even more strung out, went back the next day. My guitar player, John Goodwin, picked me. He came to my apartment. He goes, dude, you are blowing it. It's like you are doing what millions of us want to do, and you're just shit all over it. And like, get in the car. I'm taking you back to rehab. He goes, getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And when he said that to me, man, that hit me, and I think so then I went back to treatment, and again, that 89 was the year of transition, and then, like I say, I finally got clean in 1990. But I think the thing about it is, if you went to the doctor and he says, hey man, you've got, stage 1 or stage 2 cancer, you would drop everything to take care of that. It's an illness, it's a disease, it's progressive, it's fatal. You're not going to survive it. We would stop everything, right? Yet when we are faced with that same thing with addiction and alcoholism, which are also illnesses and a disease, which are progressive, most often fatal, and certainly with consequences until we get to the grave. We go, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm going to go down to the bar and have a drink and think about that, So it's a very insidious illness in that when we're in trouble, we understand the seriousness of it. We at least understand the seriousness of its consequences. We don't necessarily always understand the seriousness of the illness itself. And that's what I think took me a couple years to get my mind around, because my first trip to rehab, I was 23. Wow. We just played to 107,000 people, the biggest concert ever on the planet or something, with Iron Maiden and Kiss, all my heroes. And yet I was completely strung out. I was detoxing when I was playing the show. It was just terrible. It was a horrible feeling, and I was, the biggest moment of my life, of my career, something I've worked my entire, life toward. And there I am, and I'm completely ill-equipped for the moment because I'm strung out, so I was like, okay, I got to get help, but getting the help, we all want help, but we want help on our terms, and so that's, I think, what the rest of the next 18 months were for me. And so finally, what I realized with addiction is understanding, look, there is no way out. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse from here. And are you willing to do it someone else's way? I think that's kind of the main, common denominator of people who get clean. They finally go, all right, I'm in. What do you want me to do? And doing it someone else's way. And that's that. I think the challenge with that in our industry can be that, the spotlight is always on us. We're used to getting our way all the time. And if you don't fire you, we'll get someone else. You know what I mean? So we're, and obviously the more famous you are, the more money people are making from you, with you. They sort of bend the rules. They turn a blind eye. It's like, well, as long as I'm getting my paycheck or my commission or whatever, let's just keep making the donuts. And then pretty soon, one day, the golden goose dies. Like you mentioned, Amy Winehouse, and the list is endless.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the golden goose is dead, and it's like, well, now we really are out of a job. But it's hard because some people don't want to get clean and they don't want help. And we've been around those people. I'm sure both you and me.
Yeah. Well, and also most addicts get to a point where they don't feel like they're doing it to get high or to party. They're doing it to not get sick and stay stable. So the misconception about addiction is that, oh, well, I'm out just doing heroin because I'm partying. Whereas a lot of people, and they finally found something that in their minds makes them normal. It's very hard for them to go to rehab and try to fix that. And you were very young. I mean, that's a young age to make such a life-changing decision. And while you're getting clean, people around you are not necessarily getting clean. So you had to continue as a musician on a scene where drugs was still around, and in your own band, I believe it was still continuing.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. Dave talked about that very openly in a book that he just published called "The Rust in Peace: Making a Rust in Peace." And there was a moment where the manager on the feed, he told us, he goes, guys, the oil is yours to have. I mean, you got all your own Capitol Records, you got everything you need, but you got to get clean. And people are not going to put up with it. Then there was a big shift back then because the music industry, people were getting clean. And we know who they are, the big rock stars who were talking about getting sober, and so there was a big shift that the industry wasn't going to be writing big fat dollar junkies anymore, and they had to get cleaned up, and so that was a pivotal moment, and fortunately there were a lot of people there willing to help us. In a day like today, I've managed some young artists, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not the credo like it was, when I was growing up.
Thankfully, yeah.
It's not that anymore. Now it's save the planet, vegan, transgender. There's other issues on the table. It's not. We're just going to take drugs and party. It's a very different motivation behind the arts these days. So thank God there were people that are willing to help and help me to get clean, because I didn't just one day just turn around and go, yeah, I think I'm going to get it together. I mean, it didn't happen like that. There's a great saying that hitting bottom, if you will, is a good definition of it, is that the next thing you're about to lose is more important than the dope and the booze. And, when the manager said, look, guys, you got to get clean or it's over. Losing, again, music, our band, Megadeth, just everything that we'd created, as somewhat dysfunctional as it was successful, and I was just like, yeah, I don't want to lose that. And that became a motivation to get clean. And I remember there was a moment I was sitting on my couch in my apartment in Studio City, late '89. And I remember just this thought going, I don't even know if I want to play if I'm not high anymore. And immediately right behind it was this thought of like, wait a minute, you started playing when you were like 11. You didn't take a drink until you were 15. Like the dope and the booze just got in the way of everything. And it was, I always, GOD, good orderly direction, that which, the creator above, however you want to call that. To me, it was very clear that was a divine moment, that said, hey, young man, get your bass, go that way, and march away from the drug lifestyle. And, me and Dave were kind of in that canoe together. One of us would get clean, the other would go out. The next one would get clean, and the other one would trip. And then, so finally I had a month clean, and Dave was struggling a bit, as he talks about in his book, as we were heading in the studio to cut Rust in Peace. And I stayed the course. It was kind of like I was going, with or without Megadeth, with or without Dave, with or without anything, I have got to get clean. And that is the defining moment, because if your sobriety is conditional, if conditions change, probably your sobriety does too, So for me, it was, I had that moment where I was like, okay, now I got to really do this because I want to. And I was then willing to put in the effort.
Yeah, absolutely, and not easy. It's funny or crazy to mention 3 days was your first. How long you lasted in the first rehab? That's also how long Megadeth lasted on the Aerosmith tour, right? It shows you that.
That's a good point. Yeah. So and that was an interesting sobriety transition in and around that too. And of course, the Aerosmith guys were sober at that time, about 4 years. And Steven Tyler came into the dressing room and was very gracious. He goes, guys, what's up? What's the problem? And Dave kind of laid out his grievances about sound check and a backdrop and all these other, normal production stuff we would normally get on a regular tour. And, I thought it was commendable that Steven would at least take the effort to do it. You know what I mean? It didn't change anything really because nothing changed out on the deck. And at that point, I think it was, Dave was not happy being there. And it was a very odd mix of a tour. I mean,
it's a very strange bill. Maybe they were trying to cash in and get some younger metal type fans, try to mix the audience. But it didn't seem to fit to me.
No, I mean, our managers were trying to work that out, that like, hey, let's get Megadeth on a sober tour to keep the band clean. And, it was a lot of that. And that's, again, that's, I will say, as much as I live a sober lifestyle, making decisions, especially in business, only based on sobriety, not always the best idea. There's a lot that goes with it, especially with music. It's like, is the same fan going to show up and want to hear both of these bands?
Right.
I mean, we're up there playing Hangar 18 and they're playing Love in an Elevator. That's a very different audience, and you could feel it when we were on stage. You could sort of point out the random Megadeth fans and a lot of other people going, Megadeth, who are these guys? And
Pantera toured with Skid Row, and you would sometimes see after Pantera, people head out, and some people it was almost at some nights a turnstile,
We did a show with them, actually. It was at Alpine Valley in Wisconsin. And in fact, that night we filmed the Skin of My Teeth video. It was the beginning of the Countdown to Extinction tour. And we were doing some promo gigs. And so Pantera, and then Megadeth, and then Skid Row. And it was funny because I felt like Skid Row was trying to be heavier like Pantera. And it's like, man, you guys are a great mainstream hard rock act. Like, don't try to be, we're going to be metal, and I love the Skid Row guys, but it's like, dude, you guys, to be able 18 in Life and those songs that they were able to write, I mean, clearly most can't write those songs, and those guys had an incredible career doing that. Yet Pantera came out and suddenly everybody wanted to be Pantera, and it's just like, man, stay the course. And I guess I got to, to Dave's credit, he is very clear about the journey and the, the vision of Megadeth. And we have never been a follower. The only time we ever even tipped our toe in that water was probably, the late 90s. Management was encouraging us to, kind of advance our sound a little bit to, to be able to play nice with radio. And it worked great on Cryptic Writings. It was good. That was a very weird time. Seattle music was popular. The new metal movement had come in. Active rock radio was this new format that was driving a lot of sales and success for hard rock and metal bands of that time. And Megadeth was able to kind of reinvent its sound in America. Which it worked. A lot of those songs are, like Trust and things like that are still in the set, to this day.
Yeah, it was the Risk record, I think, that you're probably referring to, where it
went too far.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a different direction for you. Although some people love that record as well. Maybe that's the one they discovered. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's so look, it's all part of the journey. So now we're 16 albums in, and working on that album now, and
10 Grammy nominations.
12 actually.
Oh my! My information's outdated, but it's
well,
nuts.
They finally let us take the 12th one home, which was very kind of them.
I was going to say, where's the Grammy at? I wanted to see
up
it.
there. Yeah, it's sitting up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean,
it is cool. You know, I've gone to the Grammy several times, and it's great. I mean, you're in the biggest club there is. You know, I mean, the Grammy TV show is the equivalent of the Super Bowl, you know, or the Oscars. I mean, it's the gold standards. It's as big as it gets. You know, like they say, music's biggest night, and it really is.
And for those who don't like it, you know, or don't like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's the biggest FU to the system when a band like Megadeth cracks through. You know, so as a fan, you have to be happy to see Mariah Carey have to watch Megadeth and speak for those fans, because not many bands are going to get that experience.
I felt the same way, and I think our fans felt the same way. They were really happy that Megadeth, you know, finally, you know, grabbed a Grammy, and so did the Recording Academy, who are the Grammys basically. I remember I took my son Roman. We went up to their office over in Santa Monica a few months later, and even they were like going, "God, it's about time," you know what I mean? Like they were thrilled, and it was a younger generation, you know, running the Recording Academy, and they were thrilled. They're like, "Oh my God, thank God you guys finally won." It's like they were pulling for us. Yeah, they were pulling for us. And then, you know, and I tell you, the Grammys were you know, they invited, I remember, like the guys from Mastodon and me and, you know, anybody, you know, from our genre, because they admitted, they said, look, we realize we don't get metal right. For whatever reason, this is one category that we just seem to miss the mark on. And they were asking us, they said, look, we are inviting you to be part of our consulting you know, board, and, you know, helping with our voting so that we make sure these songs get put into the right category. This is a category that's so specific, that's so fan driven, that if you miss it, the egg is on your face. And
did you suggest Jethro Tull when you got in?
No, of course not. I mean, and they knew. I mean, they know. That does not fall on deaf ears around there. And so, you know, to their credit, I commend them, saying, hey, let's call on the experts. You know, let's call on the bands that have won Grammys. Let's get them in here to help make sure we don't do that again, you know.
And you guys are cool. Pioneers of heavy metal. You're not some band that just came out and won a Grammy. This has been, you've been that band forever. And so I think there's no one more qualified to talk about it. I want to talk a little bit about your faith, David, because, you know, I think people look at Megadeth and they see death and skeletons and this image. Not that the Bible or life is any different than some of these images, but so in Arizona, you're very based. You have a church, a non-denominational church that you and I think, I don't know what your title is. Is it a prayer leader?
Well, I was a worship leader there for a while. Meaning I led the music, and so I did a lot of writing and stuff in that. And it's actually a faction of a Lutheran church, the Shepherd of the Desert. And a pastor got called in to start. I was an elder for a while. I didn't even know what an elder was. And one of the first topics was our current pastor at that time was going to retire, and they had a call out for some new pastors. So I got to be part of that process to see how that kind of corporately works, you know, inside of a church. And I grew up a Lutheran kid, and my dad was on, you know, building committees, and my mom sang in the choir. So I mean, I guess it's kind of ingrained in the Ellefson, the Norwegian heritage that we have to, you know, I mean, most of us, if we're of European descent, have some either Protestant or Catholic, you know, Judeo-Christian background of some sort, at least through my generation. But I think maybe after my generation, it started to fall off a lot more. But so I grew up in, you know, around it, and you know, nothing fanatical, you know, we're not witch burners. We're not of the kind of the born again.
No, I don't think that I don't think you're one of these preaching people. In fact, I don't think you talk about it often, but there are videos that people can see. And through your faith, it seems like you reach out to help other people with sobriety and other things. And these are things that you're not looking to take credit for, but is definitely part of your life. And so I think it's interesting that people get to see that, because I don't think that Megadeth is, and Dave Mustaine is also a person of faith now, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you hit the walls and the bottoms that me and Dave hit. You know, you start to go, okay, I'm at the bottom. You have no choice but to look up, look up toward the light, go toward the light, young man. And Dave's had his own journey. He's talked openly about that in his memoirs. And, we talk about that often and, kind of what's the motivation for living life, and, as you get older, you're married with families and, you raise kids and you realize you've created a life, through you that's bigger than you. And I think that's a kind of a realization. And so it's like, okay, well, how did that happen? And I always say, there's the creator up above with the big C, that's what he does. He creates, people, inspiration, talents, it all belongs to him. And by way of that, we're able to make money and start coffee companies, and have this conversation. So to me, it's just, we're just conduits for the creator to work, and, I think that's what music is, as I, it's been a real blessing to work with Dave. He is a guy who is absolutely a conduit for music that flows through him. I've seen Eddie Van Halen interviews now since he's passed where he's talked very much about that. He goes, I don't know where it comes from. It just flows through me. And we look at these people as having this incredible talent. And I'm more of the belief, because I've sat in the room and watched it so many times, especially with Dave and other people I've gotten to work with, that I don't know that it's so much a talent as they're just a vessel, and it flows through. Like Dave will pick up a guitar and write something, and I'll so often go, God, it's not that complicated. Like it's not that difficult, but it sounds right. And had I come up with something, maybe it wouldn't have been there. He came up with it, and it's like, wow, there it is. It's right there. And what is the difference of that? Well, my calling of my role in the group, for instance, and the things that I do are different. It's kind of like on a team. Not everybody can be the pitcher. Not everybody can be the first baseman. We need some outfielders. We need, some of those often less glorious jobs. Even though the pitcher gets all the camera time.
Well, that might be the key. One of the keys to Megadeth's success, that you didn't try to do more than what your position was, and do it well.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's it's funny in my Team Ellefson empire here, we call it staying in your lane. Stay in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you're supposed to be over here, don't try to go over to the fast lane because you think that's where all the fancy action is. Stay over here. Everybody's got to stay in their lane, and I think it's very true in Megadeth. That and bands are very much that. Everybody has a role. When the drummer tries to be the lead singer, there's a problem. When the bass player tries to do the lead guitar riff,
unless it's the Foo Fighters, and it's
okay. There are exceptions.
Very rare.
Right?
Very rare. David, so we should also, before we wrap up, we got to talk about the future of Megadeth. There is a new album on the way. You guys had a tour planned. It was canceled, because obviously everything was. So tell me, what's the future of Megadeth?
Well, there is a tour. It was rescheduled from last year, Metal Tour of the Year, which is Megadeth, Lamb of God, Trivium, and In Flames. It is rescheduled for summer of 2021. And, look, as best we know, it's happening. Live Nation put out a statement last week saying that everything's a go. We plan on being fully active in the tour season. Dr. Fauci had just come out right after that, saying by the end of May we'll have no vaccines for everybody. So I guess look, my base is tuned. I'm prepared to go. I hope we go. Even though I know it could look slightly different than what we would normally have with a full-blown, open amphitheater. But, what do we know? It's day by day, it's week by week, really, I think, is how we're playing it.
And you guys are writing, though, for a new album, too, right?
Oh, yeah, no, the albums, we're definitely working on that. Yes, that's for sure. That's and again, with the release date, hard to tell. Normally something of that size you want to release around a tour cycle that can happen. It's not going to come out by June. So, it's not going to fall in and around a summer tour by any means. But, something like that, you want to make sure you can tour and the world's open and you can go out and really support that. So, the initial thinking was 2022 was where it was all going to land. And maybe for a release and everything. Again, week by week, we'll kind of go by what nation and what the promoters are saying, and whenever they can let us go, we're there.
And it's easy to get.
We are so there.
Yeah. It's easy to get information these days so people can check the websites. Okay, let me explain now all the things that how I'm going to incorporate David Ellefson into my life, all right? First of all, there's a book to read. It's a fictional autobiography called Rockstar Hitman, and it's available right now. You can go down into the to the description here, and I'll have links to that so you can buy it. It's available on Barnes & Nobles. If reading's not your thing anymore, David will, with his soothing Rick D's DJ voice, will read the book to you. So anyway, that's an option too. Then October 12th, and hopefully by October 12th, you'll have music and concerts and things too, but you can also see the found footage horror movie Dwellers. And this is on Ellefson Films. The book is on Ellefson Books. Then I'm going to get myself some Ellefson coffee. I probably should do that first because I'm going to need a little coffee to stay awake through all your endeavors. I'm going to get the roast in peace to start. And I'm going to use almond milk myself, but maybe I'll try that stuff you recommended. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, try the oat milk. Yeah, but anyway, I guess we should probably get some popcorn. We should have all Ellefson popcorn if we're going to have films now, right?
You better get to it. But yeah, it's great. People tune in to hear about Megadeth, and we're discussing almond milk and oat milk. Oat milk is kind of the thing, from what I hear. It's going to be the number one dairy substitute. But anyway, that's okay. So you have those options. Of course, people are at home. Megadeth's catalog is available. You can find it. You can listen to music anywhere. If you don't know all the records, this is a great time to brush up. And obviously, it hasn't ended. Music still, Megadeth's still making new music. And then, of course, I didn't mention the record label. I got to send you my record because I want to be on Elvison Music. So I'm going to send you that.
Send it over. Yeah.
Yeah, and because you got great bands on there, and you've had a great. You have a great eye. You're hands-on with the bands that you work with as well, the bands that you manage. You've always kind of, you're fortunate to have Megadeth behind you, and you've used your name and your brand and your talent to help other artists as well. And so I think that's another great thing. So you can go to David Ellefson's websites, of course. You can go to his social media. Luckily, nowadays, there's no excuse not to know what's going on. I'm really glad you joined me. I know a lot of this. I always tell people, how many times can you tell it? But you really are good at thank God you got sober at 23 because you can still remember.
Yeah, I got to brag. I do remember it. I remember most of it. That's why the webmaster always calls me and goes, "Hey, where were you in July 9th of 1984?" Yeah, and I remember most of it. So it's been a blessing. Yeah, people
who watch these get very mad if you don't know exactly. So when you're interviewing someone, you really need to have somebody who remembers, because otherwise, you angry comments across the board. So thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you doing this. I can't wait to see you back here in Vegas and on the road. So
thank you, Jason. Good to chat again, buddy. See ya.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye. See ya.